Um, Sian Hill is a therapeutic coach and expert in breaking the cycle of abuse. Sian helps parents go from feeling stressed, anxious, and overwhelmed to having more hope, potential, and freedom than they imagined possible. After experiencing abuse most of her life and seeing the devastating effects on her children, Sian found the key to real healing, lasting change, and true freedom. And now her life and her children's lives look very different. Through one-to-one coaching, group programs, and online communities, Sian gives you the key to breaking free from the toxic effects of abuse so you can find freedom from the emotional, mental, and physical health problems that are holding you back to go from surviving life to truly thriving and give your children the most precious gift a parent can ever have, their future. Well, that sounds awesome. So thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming. Thank you. And it's nighttime for you. So thank you for spending your evening with us.
That's okay. You're very welcome. I'm really excited to talk to you. It's really nice to meet you finally as well.
I know, in actual face to face, that's actually great.
I know.
So tell us your story. I didn't bring my tissues. I knew that I was supposed to, but I
Yeah, it's yeah, it's a bit of a roller coaster, but as you know, you've been there. It's a roller coaster ride for many of us, isn't it? So I left an abusive relationship September 2010. At the time, didn't realize it was abusive. Just thought he had a bit of an anger problem, was a bit violent. And there was a particularly bad incident where he tried to kill me. And it was kind of, that was what was the rod that broke the camel's back. I called the police, and the rest, as they say, is history. And the reason it kind of propelled change, because I tried to leave for about 18 months. We all know how difficult it is to leave, was because it was just different that time. And it was the first time that I honestly thought he could kill me. And I just had visions of my kids growing up without a mum. And we'd been through a lot. I'd been homeless twice. I'd lost custody of them for nearly a year and had fought to get them back. And I was just like, they've been through too much to now lose their mum after all of that. So we moved 200 miles away from family and friends, where I grew up, to a place that we'd never been before, didn't know anyone. So it was really, really challenging. Joey didn't have any money, didn't know anyone, and single mum to 3 kids as well. Eldest son is autistic, so that was challenging in itself. But my youngest was really affected by the abuse. He had lots of anger problems, and for a long time, it kind of felt like I was living with another abuser. It was really, really challenging. And but I just kind of had this sense that it must have had to happen for a reason, and that things would get better somehow. And I tried anything and everything, and things were getting a little bit better, but it kind of felt like we were taking 2 steps forward and about 12 back. And then kind of when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. I was diagnosed with ME, had lots of arthritis, had to have both my hips replaced. And in amongst all of this, my youngest, who was 12 at the time, had a breakdown and tried to kill himself.
Oh gosh.
At 12. Um, and as you can imagine, my world fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was like, we all know how devastating abuse can be, how much of a huge impact can have on your life. But when you see the effects on your children, it can be really heartbreaking. And I just felt so helpless. And when I reached out to try and get help for him, I couldn't get any. We were told that it would be at least a 2-year wait. I didn't have no money. I couldn't afford to pay privately for therapy for him.
Mm-hmm.
And by then, obviously I'd come a little bit of a way forward, and I'd started coaching and working with other survivors. I'd learned quite a bit about abuse and trauma. And I just thought, well, do you know what? I failed him enough times in the past. I'm not going to fail him now. So I thought, well, if no one else is going to help him, I'm going to somehow become the help that he needs. And that's kind of how I'm here today. I went away, learned a lot about developmental trauma. And what was really interesting about it, and this is why it fuels what I do now, is because before I noticed a change in him, I noticed a huge change in me and in my clients. And I was like, hang on, there's something happening here. What is it? And learned about the nervous system and lots of other things, and kind of discovered what the missing link was and the key to healing. which obviously is going to come up as we're talking tonight. And although primarily we're talking about helping children heal, it's going to resonate a lot for people watching as well as to how they got here themselves. And it's really going to answer a lot of questions for them personally, as well as how to help their kids. So that was quite a while ago now. Our lives look really different. Our lives aren't perfect by a far stretch. The imagination life still happens. We've had a couple of challenging weeks, which is why we had that kind of had a little bit of an influence on our communication, didn't it, over whether we were going to do today or not. But it's just both me and them are a lot more resilient. So when those waves come crashing, it doesn't sabotage us now. And it's just like, but it's all about compassion. It is about having compassion. And I know there's a lot of people that will say, oh, compassion drives out shame and it's lightness that drives out darkness and stuff. And it sounds a bit cliche, but it is true. But it is about learning the right stuff and then be able to go forward. So like my children now, my eldest is at university, but my youngest is coming up 16 now, and he's a completely different kid. So for anyone who's like worried, we've gone right down that roller coaster ride. We've been right at the top and we've been right down in the swamps. At one stage, I think the roller coaster wasn't even moving. It got stuck in the muck, and I thought, oh, we're never gonna get out of it. Yeah. But we did, and for most of the time, he's a really, really happy, confident kid. And my daughter, especially, is she's kind of like an advert for how much a child's life can turn around, despite going through so much trauma. How their life can really change drastically and for the better. So that's what drives me to do what I do, because parents do hold the key, as we'll talk about tonight. Parents do hold the key to breaking the cycle, and there's just such little help for parents. And there's no joined up solutions, and it's like there's either help for victims or survivors or for the children, and nothing in between. And I find it really frustrating, because parents do hold the key to change. And we're at a tipping point now where if we don't do things differently, then things are going to get a hell of a lot worse, really, really quickly as well, which is really frightening and kind of makes me a little bit angry as well, because I'm like, we're just skimming over the surface and not getting to what the root of the problem is. And the root of the problem isn't abusers. Which is going to be a little bit controversial for some people, but through hopefully what we're going to chat about tonight, that'll become a bit more apparent as to why they're not the root cause of the problem. So I do what I do so that no parents have to go through what I went through, so that no children have to go through what I went through, because it's really difficult when we're going through everything, but like, our kids are so innocent. They're so innocent, and it can have a devastating effect on us, but it can have such a bigger impact on children. And it is like the first thing I was going to talk about with how does abuse affect children. It's one of the biggest questions I get asked all the time. How has this affected my children? Well, if I leave, how is it going to affect my kids? And I know it keeps a lot of people stuck in abusive relationships as well, because they're worried about contact and what the impact's going to have on their children and everything. So hopefully tonight will help some people.
That's the big thing, because I hear a lot of people say that they're afraid to leave because of their children. They want to keep a family intact, but they're also, another thing I've heard very often is, if I can be there while my significant other is with my child, I can protect them better, because they're afraid of going to the court system and having the weekend visits and all that stuff. I know that's a really big issue for a lot of people, and I remind them, I mean, your child, we were children at some point, and we learned some of our toxic behaviors and from us being children. So we just continue that cycle, and we have to remember that they're so innocent. They're learning everything from what we do, not what we say, but what we do. So if it makes it seem okay. We might tell them a million times it's terrible, but if we stay, then they think it's okay. So it's our job as the parents to guide them and help ourselves by helping them and get to a safe.
Yeah. I say to people all the time, it's not what you say to people, it's what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about what you tell them, it's what you show them. And there's no job in the world where that's more important than as a parent. And we all know parenting isn't easy at the best of times, and but it's a whole lot more difficult when you've experienced abuse, because you're trying to cope with everything that you've been through. You're on this emotional roller coaster, and if you're trying to co-parent, or if you share parenting with an abusive ex, then that's seriously stressful. Then you, like you said, you may be navigating court systems, loads of other different problems, as well as the challenges of just being a single parent, because that's not easy. It's like you can't just pop out to the shops at 8 o'clock at night to get some milk if you're financially responsible for your household just by yourself. So it comes with a lot of challenges. But then when you've also got children that have experienced abuse, it can be even more challenging. They can throw up loads of challenging behaviours. You don't know how to help them in the best possible way, and then that triggers things in you, either what you've experienced in the abusive relationship you're in, or from your own childhood, because we all parent in the way that we were parented. And even if we're quite aware of toxic patterns and things that happened in our childhood, we still revert back to that programming. So it's like, even the best will in the world, sometimes you want to do things differently, and that in itself can be incredibly stressful, because you're fighting your body internally, because you want to do one thing but you just don't know. And if we haven't had those healthy relationships modeled to us, then we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how do you, like, none of us know. Anybody who becomes a parent doesn't know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
We have to allow our children to teach us and guide us, and if we're attuned to them and their needs, then everything just happens. It works. But when we haven't had that modeled for us, it can be incredibly difficult, because we don't know what a normal childhood looks like. We don't know what a normal, healthy child parent relationship looks like, and then that can make things even more challenging.
And I'm thinking as I'm nodding, and I'm in agreement. I have my 3-year-old son, is getting to the age where he's starting to need to be told, given time out and told no, and all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting because I'm so aware as a teacher. I've been in education for 16 years, so I'm so aware of myself and also my upbringing and all the things you just said. And I think that the fact that I have pretty decent self-confidence helps. And even that, I
Yeah.
myself all the time, but I feel pretty confident in myself. And I think back to me when I was old me in toxic relationships. I don't know if I would have had the confidence that I do now. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think that it would have been so much more difficult when you're leaving that type of relationship, just like you said, and you're hurting yourself. You've lost who you are. You have no confidence. You don't feel good about yourself. And now you're supposed to help another human being become like, that seems like that's an impossible thing to be able to
Yeah. And at the same time, the chances are you've probably got an abusive ex on the scene who's
yes.
trying to control everything and anything that you're doing and your children is doing, just to make things a little bit more complicated and problematic at the same time. So it's like, it's no wonder that parents really, really struggle after they've experienced abuse. And that's what kind of gets my back up a bit and gets me quite angry, because it hasn't been recognized enough, and there's nowhere near enough help for parents, which is why I ended up creating a parenting community, because it is incredibly difficult. Like you said, you've got so many things to juggle, and like you said, toddlers are a perfect example. So, like, we most of us know, so a lot of people don't, that like our job as parents is to nurture these little tiny humans so that they can learn and grow and become independent, so that when they become adults they can navigate the world on their own. So part of the way they do that, especially as toddlers, is to push boundaries and to explore the world and work out what's right and what's wrong and what's okay to do and what's not okay to do. And parenting toddlers or teenagers, that's another one. Teenagers can be incredibly challenging. They do push boundaries because that's how they learn. And like you said, it's being confident is a huge part of that. And when you're going through your own stuff, it can be incredibly difficult. And I see it every day, people that are really, really struggling with knowing what to do. And as you know, when you've experienced abuse, you doubt yourself even more. So it's so easy to spiral into a situation that you just don't know what to do. And unfortunately, there's just not enough understanding out there among professionals of how it affects us, but how it affects our children. So as a result, there's no joined up thinking or approaches with schools, with health systems, with anywhere, well, certainly not with the court systems either, but that's a whole different story. We'd be here all bloody night if we talked about that. But it can be really difficult, and it can be incredibly stressful as well. And it's quite interesting actually saying about time out, because that's one of the things that I teach against, about using time in rather than time out, because if I give you it helps with all kids, whether they've experienced abuse or not. But I use the analogy of children being like a boat on the sea. And as children, they don't know how to navigate that boat. It's just kind of bobbing along by itself. And because our job is to help them learn and navigate life, then over time they are able to kind of morph into the captain of the ship, and they're able to steer it for themselves. But when there's big waves happening, like when they have a tantrum or when they've experienced abuse, and there's or anything, it could be like a grandparent dying or somebody saying something nasty to them in the school, in the playground, because unfortunately our children now face a whole load of different challenges than we did growing up. A whole load of challenges, and our job then is to steer that ship, to be their anchor. And sometimes we need to steer that ship back into the harbour and safely anchor it there for a while before they can set sail again. And it's so yeah, there's a lot of, so the reason I mentioned that is because it's useful with time in and time out, because what we do is we don't detach the child from the behaviour. So it's like a child can't express their emotions. So the waves come and that boat starts jumping around all over the shop because emotions are really, really scary for them. And all they know is, I'm really, really scared right now. I don't know what to do. So when we use time out, that's quite often when shame can come in, and then where they think that something's wrong with them. So by using time out, what we're doing is we're accepting them and showing them unconditional love, whatever they're saying or doing. That doesn't mean, and quite often people get confused with this because they think that means that we're saying that their behavior is okay. And it's not, because as you know, there's a big difference between healthy shame and toxic shame. And healthy shame is important. That's how healthy shame is, how we teach our kids it's not really a good idea to run out in front of a car that's moving. But toxic shame is where we say that they're bad for running out in front of that car. Whereas it's not, it's just the behavior that is. And yeah, there's been loads of research into how time out can create more toxic shame. Whereas time in is saying, look, whatever you're doing or saying right now, I get that there's things going on for you, but whatever you say or do, I'm going to love you no matter what, and I'm going to accept you no matter what. But it's a really good moment actually, just to remind everyone, including you, that we're always doing the best that we can, and we're going to make mistakes, all of us, whether we've experienced abuse or not. And this is where compassion is so important. Compassion for me is about understanding. It's about having an understanding of what's going on for you and what's going on for your children, because that helps you so much to accept yourself, whatever you're doing or saying, or and them. But then being able to say, look, you know, yeah, I made a mistake. I'm human. I'm allowed to make a mistake. I'm allowed to get it wrong. But when you do, not beating yourself up and going, do you know what? I was doing the best I could, so I'm going to forgive myself and let go of that now. And let's just start tomorrow again. And again, that's something else that comes we really struggle with after abuse, or especially childhood trauma, because we don't think that we're good enough. We don't believe that we're good enough. We don't believe that we're worthy enough. So we're more likely to beat ourselves up and go, oh, I messed that up again. I can't do anything right. I might as well give up now. There's no point in trying. And it's really, really easy to get sucked into that spiral, isn't it? Where before you know it, you think there's just no point in me trying anymore. So that's why compassion is so important.
Oh, yeah. Always learning.
We are. And I was having a conversation with someone about this last week, actually, about the fact that, like, we're all growing and changing and learning all of the time. And even experts have always got something to learn. And especially now, because science and technology has come so far that there's new things to learn all of the time. And then depending on what's happening around us, or we learn, then we grow in response to that, either in a negative or a positive way, depending on what's happening. But there is always something to learn. And it is about, I say all the time, healing is all about learning.
Yep. That's what life is about to me. It's the journey. It's there's always something exciting, interesting. I'm always growing. If you're not growing, you're dying. You know, like, just, you keep getting new information and just keep adding along to it, and go along your way, and you know, and realize everyone's doing the best they can with what they've got.
Yeah, absolutely. And if that's not working for you, then it's about learning and gaining more resources so that you can do things differently and you've got more choices. It's not about beating yourself up. It's about knowing that you're doing the best that you can. And we are. And that's, for me, that's even more important with parenting after abuse, because there are so many challenges and life can be so stressful that knowing that can be incredibly difficult. And it's so important to know.
So let's hear some of these tips.
Yeah. Okay. I know we'd be talking all night otherwise, won't we?
Because there's so much great stuff, and of course, you know, so many parents out there. We want to know what we can do, especially if we haven't had the best examples. It's great to just know what are some things that we can do to be better parents for our children.
Yeah, well, what I'm going to do then is, I think the best thing to do is just kind of skim over the first 2 points so we can get right into the how we do it and how we help our kids, because I know that that's what everybody is going to want to hear about. But I just feel that the first 2 are quite important just to touch on, only because there may be people watching this who think, well, actually, I think my kids are okay. I don't think the abuse has really affected them. And this is something that I also see a lot as well, because the effects of, well, not just abuse, but trauma in general can quite often go unnoticed. There's so many of us that didn't realise that we had dysfunctional childhoods. Like, I thought I didn't think my childhood was very good. But it wasn't until I started healing that I realised my mother was emotionally abusive. And I was like, oh, wow, that explains quite a bit then. But we don't know, do we? And it's because children's behaviour is just the tip of the iceberg. Well, same as all of us. And there's a lot of other stuff going on underneath, and mainly around needs. And the first 3 years of a child's life are the most important. That's when all the foundations develop, because your nervous system, there's one big part of it that isn't working when we're born. So we learn and grow, and our bodies and our brains develop by connecting with our parents or with our primary caregivers. So if our parents and caregivers aren't emotionally balanced, haven't got a healthy nervous system and they're not emotionally stable, then we can't learn how to respond to stress in the right way. So what happens is we can come crashing down all the time from a fight flight response right down into a freeze. So children don't learn how to self-soothe, and then it goes on from there, and you don't form healthy attachments, which means that you then don't feel able to be yourself. You feel that you need to fit in. And like kids have the model of, because of our need for attachment, because obviously children are completely dependent on their parents, especially as little tiny ones, then the way their bodies are wired means that they won't believe that something is wrong with one of their parents. They'll internalize it as, well, it's my fault. There's something wrong with me. And like some of the survivors that I've worked with, some of the ones that have actually been the most damaged are the ones that haven't experienced abuse early in life. They're not the ones who have had hugely traumatic events happen. They're the ones who grew up believing there was a condition to love, being told that they needed to act or behave a certain way in order to receive care and attention. And it affects their development. And those first 3 years determine how a child shows up later in life as an adult. But the good news is that we can repair those foundations, and they're a lot easier to repair as a child than they are as an adult. But it doesn't matter. Like, I've got a client who's 70, and it's never too late to change. But with children, they're really malleable. So like, this is the one thing that a lot of people understand, but some don't, is that abusers and victims aren't born, they're created. And this is why parents hold the key to breaking the cycle, because being able to heal ourselves so that we can help our children heal is how we break the cycle. Like you were talking about the generational cycles, they pass down the generations, but every time they hit a new generation, it's like a snowball coming down a mountain, and it gathers speed and it gathers momentum. And the problem that we've got, which is how I'm going to jump into the second point at the same time, is that this generation faced challenges that we didn't. They've got the internet and social media, which has completely changed the face of abuse. And they've got signals everywhere telling them that they're not good enough. And it's like, when I was growing up, I hated myself. I thought there was something really wrong with me. Do you mean, I thought that everything that happened around me was my fault because there was something drastically wrong with me. But I didn't have the internet and social media. And if I did, then I don't know what would have happened. I don't know if I'd be sat here with you tonight. Because, and that is the reality. That's why child suicide rates and everything are going up. So to like, we put money into perpetrator, not us personally, the government put money into perpetrator programs and stuff, and they don't work. Like, we know, us guys working with survivors know that abusers can't change. But unfortunately, there's a lot of money spent on trying to help them change rather than actually putting the money to where we can make the change happen. And that's about helping parents heal so their children can heal. Because if parents heal and they're growing children that aren't traumatized and they've got healthy foundations, or they're repairing them, then we're going to stop breeding abusers, and we're going to stop breeding victims. And that's how we're going to create real change, is changing things as we go forward. So that's why I say the real problem isn't, obviously it is abusers, because they abuse, that it's their fault, you're never to blame, but a big part of healing is recognizing how you got here. And if you're a parent, that's a really, really big part of healing, because otherwise, and I know it's no one's intention, none of us want to harm our children, but I was saying to somebody last week actually that, like, I've got huge gratitude for everything that I've been through. I've got huge gratitude for all the shit I've been through, because it's led me to where I am right now. I live in a beautiful part of the UK. I'm doing a job that I love, and I love my life. But if I'd been one of the fortunate ones, one of the minority who didn't experience an abusive relationship after a childhood, after experiencing childhood trauma, I would have traumatized my children.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's like that. There's this beautiful gift in healing. There is for anybody, but when you're a parent, there is the most amazingly beautiful gift, because it means that we can give our children the gift of their future.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just the most incredible gift that you can ever give them, isn't it? So I'm just going to jump back to the first point quickly before we jump on, because I was saying that in the description I said that quite often it goes unnoticed, and the reason it does is because there's a lot of behaviours now that get misdiagnosed or misrepresented when actually it's trauma. It's children being stuck in survival mode, because children are really, really malleable, so they adapt in order to survive. So things like ADHD, that's trauma. It's high cortisol. When your body's stuck in fight flight, the adrenaline and the cortisol is running around their body and everything, and they can't come out of it. But the other side of it is when they're stuck in more of a freeze response, when a child is withdrawn, or when they're the perfect child, they never misbehave. They do the smile and nod, and it's like they'll do anything that you ask them to do. That's normally because they've learned that actually being quiet and being small is how they stay safe.
Mm-hmm.
And what tends to happen then is that as they become teenagers, that's when it starts coming out. Because teenagers, it's a bit like being a toddler, because they've got so many changes in their body. It triggers stuff from when they were tiny. So that's when they go off. Then you get stealing, and you get loads of different challenging behaviors, because it's just triggering stuff, and it's about unmet needs. But the most important thing is that children don't know why they've done stuff, because trauma, there's a disconnect between cause and effect in their brain. So because they get stuck in survival mode, which is their base brain, then they can't access the thinking part of their brain, so they can't link cause and effect. So, and this is what I'm going to talk about a little bit in the third point, is how we help them link these things together so they can make sense of the world around them. And this is why learning the right stuff is important for us as well, because these incredible human higher brains that we've got are what make us uniquely human. They are our creativity, our logic, our rational brains, but we get stuck in them trying to make sense of everything. So learning the right stuff is so important, because then it satisfies our heads and it goes, oh, okay, it's all right now. I know what I need to know. Now I'll move on. So I've got both of the points stuck in together, unfortunately. So, but that wasn't my intention. It's just the way the conversation went. So should we just jump straight into how to do it? Because I think that's what everyone's going to want to know, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So like I said, even if your child is in contact with an abusive parent, they can still heal. A child, and there's quite a lot of research coming out now about this, that a child only needs one emotionally balanced and stable parent. So it doesn't matter how much of a nightmare your ex is, how much they're trying to control them, if you are able to make them feel safe, and you're able to make them feel connected so that they can then regulate their nervous system, which is what it's all about, then they'll be able to integrate those experiences. Because trauma it's a belief that or a feeling that you're going to die, but it's also a feeling or experience that you're unable to integrate. Well, if they're able to integrate those experiences because you're able to create that safe space for them, and they feel loved and accepted, whatever they're going through, then they're going to be able to work through that. And it's not going to have a detrimental effect in their life. And I work with parents whose children, anywhere between the age of like 10 and 16, will see the abuse for what it is then, because you're modeling what a healthy parent-child relationship looks like. You're modeling what a healthy behavior looks like. And then of their own accord, they'll go, yeah, I don't want to go there. and I don't need to because I've got you. It's when they haven't got, that's how alienation happens, is because they haven't got that connection. So the other person, the abusive parent, is able to manipulate them, because like whether or not, it's the same with us, whether an abusive person is able to manipulate us is our choice. And unfortunately, when we first get into an abusive relationship, we don't know that, and then it spirals out of control, and then we have less choices, and then trying to get out of it is really, really scary, and it's really frightening. And especially if they're manipulating and they're controlling you financially as well, then getting out can be really challenging, can't it? But if a child has got that emotional stability in you as a parent, they're going to be able to work through all of that. And I see it every single day. I see amazing stories every single day that prove that, day in, day out. So like I said, they need you to be emotionally balanced. So in other words, they need you to heal so that they can. Because if you don't heal, then even if they're going to therapy twice a week, you're going to re-traumatize them. And this is one of the things that can be really challenging, because like we were saying earlier, they do things or say things, kids know what buttons to push, and then it triggers you. So it's about being aware of the fact that it's about you, their needs, and not your needs as a parent. So it's about like kind of putting your needs in a box for a moment and putting them like on the shelf, but then picking them back up afterwards and going, right, now I can focus on mine. Because when we don't focus on ours and we suppress them, that's what causes us more problems over time. Because like I don't know whether you know or not, but like suppressed anger is one of the biggest causes of depression, because it's high energy. Do you know what I mean? You block all of that in and you stuff it down inside you, it's going to cause problems over time, isn't it? So yeah, so it's about becoming a calm and a balanced role model. So it's about learning how to respond to them rather than react, which can in itself can be incredibly difficult, because when they won't do something or thing, your gut feeling is to go and things. So it's about learning how to calm yourself. But like I said, it's about being that anchor for them, so that you can help ground them. Now, Dan Hughes, who's a child psychologist, has got an approach called PACE, and I kind of take it one bit further than that. I call it SPACE, so that you can help your children heal. And the reason I call it SPACE is because it's about recognizing the fact that they're going to trigger you because of everything. You need to heal alongside them. But the good news is that you only need to be a couple of steps ahead of your kids. You literally need to be a couple of steps ahead of them. And if you can establish safety in your body, so that you're not stuck in fight flight, or you're not stuck in freeze, then you're going to be able to connect to them. And actually, and I've seen this so many times, something beautiful happens, because you can connect to we all need to connect to heal. We need to connect in relationships to heal with other people. And when you're a parent, you can do that with your child. So you can help your children heal, but your children can actually help you heal as well. You just need to be a couple of steps ahead of them. So yeah, so I use an acronym called SPACE. So the S is for self-awareness. So it's about being aware of when they do something or they say something, being aware of how that comes, that shows up for you. So it's about being aware of your stress responses, your survival instincts, whether you're feeling calm and balanced right now, or whether or not they've really pushed your buttons and you're in a fight, flight, or freeze response. So you're more likely to react to them. And then being able to balance yourself. And I happen to notice actually that you've got an interview coming up this week about playfulness, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah, which is the P, because playfulness it's such a great tool for helping kids learn. There's been quite a lot of research done. I think it takes something like, to be able to grow new pathways in your brains, it takes something like 400 interactions with a child. And if you're doing it through play, it can take 20.
Oh, wow.
It's like a huge huge difference. But like playfulness isn't just about like sitting down and playing trains with your little boy or playing ball out in the garden or something. It's just about using laughter and using humor. Do you mean like if you've got, I quite often used to do with my son quite a lot, and again there's a balance between healthy and toxic shame, but like if he was kicking off about something, he was really angry, because you can't talk to them because they're stuck in survival mode, they're not going to be able to hear you because it shuts down their higher brain. I used to do something like, did you just see that pig flying out the window? And he'd go, what? I was like, there's a pig, look, it's flying out the window. And it's like, and he'd be like, you're so embarrassing, Mum. But in that moment, it calms their system and it brings them back down out of fight flight. So it doesn't need to be like playing as in the normal sense of playing. It can just be like using humor or laughter to be able to break that moment. So that's the P of space. Then A is acceptance, like we were talking about earlier. So it's about detaching our children from the behavior, and understanding why they behave the way they do, whether that's going up the wall or whether it's being really withdrawn and not wanting to speak, which for some people that can be as challenging as your children being really angry, because it's like you want to talk to them, you want to be able to help them work through something, and if they don't want to, then you can take that personally, and you're like, well, is there something wrong with me then, because they won't. And it's like, no, that's what they need right now. They're just stuck in a bit more of a freeze response, and we need to kind of thaw them out and bring them back out. So if they're like climbing the walls and they're stuck in fight flight, we need to bring them back down. And if they're stuck in more of a freeze response, we need to bring them back up. And playfulness and acceptance is a really great way of doing that, because it's about detaching the child from the behavior and accepting them whatever they're saying or doing. And like I was saying earlier, using strategies like time in. Boundaries are really important as well, having really strong boundaries, having really stable fixed routines. Sorry.
Time in. So what is the difference between time in and a 3-minute no talking for a timeout? Like what is the difference?
Right. Right. If I use something like the biggest timeout that people usually use is something like the naughty step, isn't it? Right. So if say your child has done something, I don't know, say they've hit their brother. Right, that's quite a regular one, isn't it? Right. They've hit their brother, and you go, right, oh, that's really naughty. Go and sit on the step for a moment and think. What you do, and this ties in with the C of it as well, which is about curiosity. Okay, is you'll stay with them, so that you're obviously you need to be mindful of safety. So it's not like there's lots of different things to take into account. But if they do that, then you don't send them away. You're staying with them. And you may say something like, I was really surprised that you did that, because I know how much you love your brother and a thing. So it's not that you're kind of ignoring the behavior. What you're doing is saying that there must be stuff going on for you, because actually I know that you're not. So like, say somebody, they've hit them, and you could say something like, oh, I can see how angry you're feeling at the moment, and that's okay. And then once they've calmed down, then that's when you can have the conversation, obviously at an age appropriate level, of it's okay to feel angry, and it's okay to think, but it's not okay to hit other people. And like the timeout thing is, that was actually how everything escalated with my son, because there was an incident in school and they put him into isolation, and it was putting him into isolation that brought on the breakdown, which is really common with traumatized kids. So it's really difficult to give loads of examples in like a quick, which is why we could do a live-a-thon for like 3 days and we would still probably only skim the surface. So yeah, that's an example of time in, is not sending them away or not sending them to their room or thing, is and this ties into the C now of curiosity, is doing the right, what was driving that behavior. So
No,
what need wasn't,
yeah, you have to do that for sure.
yeah, what need was driving that behavior? And
Mm.
9 times out of 10 for kids, it's feeling scared.
Mm-hmm.
So it's what need either wasn't being met, or what need hasn't been met in the past that may be triggering their behavior now. Because it could be that something's happened in their life years and years before, and all of a sudden in that moment, things have been lined up together, because trauma gets trapped in your body's sensory experiences. So it could be that you could feel something and you heard something at the same time, and in that moment it triggered them back to that moment. So, and it can take a bit of piecing together sometimes, but it's about doing something called naming the need. So it's about, right, going, what in that moment, what need wasn't being fulfilled for them, what need do I need to help them fulfill, and then over time being able to show curiosity and naming the need. This is where we can help link then cause and effect for them. Okay, so that we use, what you do is you use things like natural consequences. So say for example, I'll use one that came up the other day for somebody. Their child had gone into the cupboard and eaten all the chocolate bars. Right, so she was like, "Oh, you must have been really, really hungry to have eaten all the chocolate bars," and I think. So he's like, and he was like, not looking, because she was like, I think, and she's like, "Oh, that's okay." She said, "If you were really hungry, then you needed to eat them." But she said, "We won't be able to have any more chocolate bars now for the rest of the week." Because they've all gone. And he's like, and she was like, "Yeah, you might feel really sad about that, but they've all gone. So we're going to have something else instead now." Thing. So that's kind of like or if they do something, then linking it, if with punishments, linking it to what it was. So say for example, you hit your brother, okay, and then going, "Oh, that was, we don't do things like that, it wasn't very nice, so you can't go on the iPad for 2 days." If it's not directly linked to what happened, then they can't work out why. Well, it's like, well, I know I hit my brother, and I know he cried, and I know I probably shouldn't have done that because it wasn't very nice, but how come I haven't got my iPad now? Because I didn't break the iPad. So it's about linking things like that together. And storytelling is a brilliant way of doing this, because story, like, as a teacher, the power of storytelling with kids. But the reason it can be really, really powerful for parents who've experienced abuse is because having these conversations with our kids can be really complicated for us. They can trigger loads of things for us, and it is a confidence thing as well. And we're not sure about like what they're going to say or do, and we can explain things to them through stories. So it doesn't need to be about them specifically. It can be about like telling them a story about a little boy who hit his brother, and he did it because he was scared or whatever, and they go away and they put they put them together. And the beauty of storytelling is that you can include playfulness, because you can do all those silly voices, those ones that we're really good at as parents, that as our children get older they disown us for being so embarrassing. Yeah, those ones. They're a great way of being able to introduce playfulness by using stories. And like even with teenagers who quite often don't want to have conversations with you at the best of times, then you can say, "Oh, you never guess what happened with so and so the other day," or whatever, or "This happened" thing. And because they're naturally quite curious, they'll listen if it's about somebody else, and then they'll go away and think about it and go, "Hang on, that's kind of how I felt. Maybe that's why I did what I did." Because if they can link these things together, then they know that they're not the problem, they're not bad, that they just did something bad. And like we said earlier, there's a big difference between you doing something bad and you believing that you're bad and that
Mm-hmm.
everything is your fault. So that's what it does. And then the E is about, which is what I've already touched on, thing. E is empathy. So it's about showing empathy and compassion, and reflecting everything back to them. So it's like I was saying earlier about, though I can see that you're angry. I'm wondering, using wondering quite a lot. Wondering if you were feeling scared then, and maybe that's why you said those things, because I know how you've got such a kind heart. I know that you wouldn't have meant to say things like that. So yeah, it's about putting all of it together, and it seems, on the outside it seems quite complicated, but it's actually quite simple. And it's about just being able to grow self-awareness and self-compassion, and then understanding what's going on for your kids. Because if you understand what's going on for your kids, that helps you have compassion. Like I find when I'm working with parents, I teach them about how their body works and about how their stress responses work, because like I find that really opens the doorway to compassion, because when they understand why they're doing and saying the things that they are, then it really helps them have compassion for themselves. And it works both ways for the children as well. When they understand why their kids are behaving the way that they are, they're not hitting their brother or stealing all the chocolate bars out the cupboard, or doing loads of different things because they're being naughty. They just want to be horrible. They're just doing it because that's the only way they know to express themselves, because like we're able to use words and language to express how we're feeling, and kids can't do that. So it is about understanding. It's about understanding what's going on for us and for them, and appreciating how shit life can be sometimes, so you can have compassion for yourself, because it can be incredibly challenging. But the most important thing is, when we're parenting, and this isn't just about parenting, like you probably see this as well with the guys that you work with, it's about being able to put down and work through that anger and the resentment and the bitterness and the pain that you're going through. Because one of the biggest challenges I see parents face, and especially when you've got an abusive ex that's creating loads and loads of problems for you, is you get locked in fighting. That having to fight in courts, having to fight him, having to fight her. And what happens is that when you get locked in fighting, you're not able to be there for your kids, and you get stuck in doing that. And over time you don't see that the people who are suffering the most are your kids. And it can be like, I've worked with people who've realized that, and it breaks their heart when they realize it. But it's like you were doing the best that you could at the time, and you realize now. And it's the same as like, how many of us beat ourselves up over, why didn't I leave sooner? Well, because you didn't know. And then when you did know, it was incredibly challenging for you, but you've done it, and you've got the opportunity to change things now. So it's all about, like, none of us can change what happened in the past. None of us can. If I could, I'd be a millionaire. But we can't change what happened in the past, but we can change how we respond to things now, and we can change our futures. And together we can make a huge difference, not just to our lives, not just to our children's lives, but to the world around us as well, because the ripple actions of the ripple effects of our actions reach so wide. And it's like we heal, and like we see this every day, don't we, with when you share your stories and other people do, you inspire other people to heal. And then when you hear another story about a parent with their child or whatever, and then that inspires you to do that, and that child inspires other children in the playground, you inspire other mums and other parents, and before you know it, one person changing has been the catalyst for 1,000 people changing. And that's how I believe that's how we'll heal our world, by having more
Agreed.
compassion and more
Agreed.
understanding. And I know you're in the US. We obviously a little bit different, but you're probably aware of the fact that we're facing a number of uncertain
Yes.
times in the UK at the moment as well. A couple of years ago, I was having this conversation with American friends all the time, and now it's for us. And when we're facing uncertainty and everything, it's incredibly scary, and there is a temptation to fight everything. But when we focus on what we can control and how we respond to it, and we have compassion, that's how the world will change. Anger and resentment and hatred only breed more of the same. It's compassion that creates change, and then courage, the courage to do it. Because I say to people all the time, I should have said this at the beginning, but I was doing the best I could. I say to people all the time that the truth has the power to set you free, but it's likely to make you feel bloody uncomfortable and seriously piss you off before it does. Because there are some truths that are like, oh, that makes so much sense. But then the emotional truths that come up as you go along, it's like they're the ones that make you feel uncomfortable. And embracing that discomfort and going, right, what's this teaching me? What lesson is this bringing? Is how we move, is how we get through it. Because the only way out is through, and we need to be able to feel in order to be able to get through it. And like we get so scared of our feelings, but they're just information. And when we start feeling them, then we can listen to that information, and then we can work through it.
And that's such a big thing, because that's where people stay trapped for so long in that survival mode.
Yeah.
The feelings are so strong and so overwhelming, and the sadness and loneliness and guilt and shame and all those different things, we feel so comfortable in those feelings that we start to change, and that's uncomfortable. So then we say, oh wait, that change is uncomfortable, and I know that shame already. I'm just going to go back there because that's what I know. And then you go back and you're like, oh, crap, no, this sucks too. I'm going to go. And you keep going, but you never really push through the wall. So it's like taking it, keep putting it back on and ripping it back off over and over again, where all you have to do is rip it off completely. Ow, for a little while. And it can change. But completely rip that thing off and just let the emotions come out and feel them. Know that they're terrible to deal with, at times, but that's what's going to set you free. That's what's going to get you to the other side. And that's where I think having a coach, someone like us is so important, because we know the discomfort, we know that pain, and we can help kind of support you and hold you up as you're feeling raw and hurting and pain and all these different things. We can hold you up and help you out and remind you it's going to get better. You're going to come out the other side. And actually, you're going to be the best version of okay. You're going to be the best version of yourself ever, but you got to get through that pain. You've got to get through the discomfort. And children, like you said, they don't know. They don't know what that pain is. And they all are known is what they've experienced. So they don't know that pain is for the moment. It's not for the always. They have the possibility.
Yeah. And it's like what you said, like I was saying earlier, it's about, we need to create a safe space for our kids. So it's like what we do as coaches is we create a safe space for our clients, so that they haven't got to go through all of that on their own. We hold that space for them so that it isn't as scary, so that we can help them navigate through those feelings. Because some of those feelings are really bloody uncomfortable and horrible to work through. But when we work through them, then there's sunshine and rainbows and everything on the other side of it. But we don't get those unless we actually feel. And it's, people are so scared of feeling stuff. And it's like, I say to people all the time, like, emotions are energy in motion. So it's like if we don't feel them, we trap that emotion, and it's got to go somewhere. Well, where does it go? It gets stuck in our body. Our bodies have to work overtime, harder. And this is where chronic health problems come from, because this energy gets trapped in your body. That's where my ME came from. So it was like when I learned about healing from the root cause and working with the nervous system, I didn't just break free from the effects of abuse. I healed from DME and everything else, loads of gut problems and stuff as well, because it's all interconnected. During our mind, body, and the environment and stuff. But with you saying about pushing through the wall as well, just going back to that, because I didn't want to interrupt you when you were talking. Like with pushing through the wall with the, oh, it's feeling unsafe, because our bodies are designed to protect us, then they've got, I mean, they'll do more to avoid pain than they will to gain pleasure. Just they go, oh, whoa, hang on, that's a bit of pain there, that's a bit scary, you better avoid that. So being aware of it is how we can then push through it. But because our body learns how to respond to stress in the first 3 years of our life, how we learn how to respond to stress as a little one then determines, it sets the foundations for how we deal with stress and how we deal with these uncomfortable feelings when we're older as well, because quite often it can bring up stuff. Like things are never isolated. So it's like if we're trying to work through shame, for example, the chances are it's because it's connected to something in our childhood. And it's like we need to respect our survival instincts, because it's like we can understand why they don't want to change, why it's uncomfortable, because they've kept us safe. And it's like there's alarm systems going off in your body, and it's like, well, why do I want to change that? That's kept you safe. Now if you change that, that means that we might not be safe again. So we just need to we need to show it that no, it can still be safe. It may be a bit bloody scary feeling all this stuff, but we can go through it. And like you said, it's pushing through that wall, because otherwise that wall gets bigger.
Yeah.
And it's harder to push through that wall. And because we're all growing and changing and we adapt to survive all the time, it gets harder to push through that wall. It gets more scary. It gets more painful. So just being able to work through stuff early on is actually, it's a lot easier than having to crash through that bigger wall later on. But then it's also important that we recognize that if that's what you've done, because that's what you needed to do, then that's okay. And that's where having a coach is going to be even more beneficial, because it's going to be it's going to be a bit more difficult to break through that wall. So you're probably going to need a bit more help and support to be able to do that. But it's having a coach is just so important, because it's the connection and knowing that there's nothing wrong with you, because somebody totally understands what you've been through, what you're going through right now. And if that coach, like we know, because obviously we've both been there, if that coach knows that you understand you've been there and you've broken through that, then that gives you hope and it inspires you that you can do it yourself. And they're more likely to be able to help you to walk through that door. I say all the time, and I know I told you about this when we spoke before, but like I say all the time, it's about, as a coach, we open a door for somebody. We hold out a hand, we turn all the lights on so it's less scary. But then they need to take the steps to walk through that door. But we make taking those steps a lot less scary than taking them on your own. You're not going into, yes, you're still going into the unknown, but it's not as scary, it's not as dark. And we've been there before, so we know how to guide you, so it's a little bit less uncomfortable.
Yeah, I love it.